Hey, I'm Levi LaVallee, and I'm here with Fox Shocks because we got some big news. You ready? iQS, Intelligent Quick Switch. You might ask yourself, what does that mean, right? Here, this is it. Literally, push of a button, you're going from soft suspension to hard suspension or halfway in between. Right, that sounds amazing. So what that turns into is you're ripping down the trail and you say, I think I want to hit that jump over there. Boop. Hard suspension. Ah! You send that thing, your buddies are like, are you kidding me? He was just ripping down the trail. It looked like he had a suspension set up for a trail. Now he just sent that huge kicker? Like, I can't do that, right? And then you go, oh, no worries. You want me to go pound that powder over there? Beep. All Chris Brandt and that stuff over there. And they're like, this guy's amazing. And you say, inside you're going, well, it's actually not me. It's my iQS system. So the question is, why put this on? Why would you put electronically controlled suspension on? Well, if it's not a no-brainer, duh, you can do all these amazing things, but one, it's gonna make you safer out on the trail because you're riding on the right suspension for the application. Two, you're gonna outperform your buddies. And three, you're gonna be the coolest kid on the block. You got electronic suspension, man, serious. All right, so what we did, we put together a little video of how to install this, because when you think of intelligent quick switch, you go, oh my goodness, this sounds like super complicated. Well, let me tell you this. I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer, but I was able to install that, so we put a video together of me doing that. So that's what we're gonna check out. I'm gonna show you how to do that, and you're gonna say, hey, I need that. I need that on my buggy. So let's get to it. So the first thing you wanna do is install the front shocks. You know, one thing you can see here is the reservoir angles towards the rear. If for some reason it's angling the other way, you obviously have the shock on the wrong side. So make sure it angles to the rear. Snug this baby up top and bottom, and then we're on to the next step. When drilling the hole for the rear suspension wires, you want to measure from this plate for the rear torque arm bolt goes through. So you want to measure from this edge 20 millimeters out from it, and then you want to measure 20 millimeters from the bottom of the running board up. Make a mark, and then take a drill bit, make a pilot hole, and then use a step bit, like so, and drive it in. 22 millimeters or 7/8 inch drill bit. After you've finished drilling the hole for the rear suspension wiring, make sure you place the grommet in there so it holds those wires nice and cozy. When installing the center track shock, a few key things that you want to remember is to make sure that the wire runs over top the torque arm and along the back side of it to keep it out of harm's way. Also, remember to run it underneath the shock mount, and when you plug it in, make sure that you hear it click to know that it's securely seated. And then you're going to want to come back and put these cable ties around the reservoir area here and on all the clearly marked cable tie areas. And something to be sure of is make sure that the reservoir is on the rider's right side and at the top, like shown here. Installing the rear shock is just like any other one, top and bottom bolt, very simple, but one of the things to remember is to make sure that the reservoir is on the rider's left and on the top, and the e-vol chamber is on the bottom rider's right. If for some reason you have those mixed up, you can actually get where the two of them could come together, and we don't want any part of that. Just trust me. So the next thing we're going to get into is routing this wire. So let's figure out how to get this wire from here all the way up to the brain. When routing the rear shock wire, you want to make sure that you route it underneath the torque arm cross shaft and fasten it here so it has a little bit of slack, and then you loop it underneath and then fasten it all along the pivot arm on all of the designated cable tie areas, and then again on this pivot arm here through this hole and on top of the torque arm. Here's another view from the bottom side of the skid so you can see how the wire is routed and where the cable ties are located. And be sure to check where the cable ties are. If they're not in the same placement as you see here, something is definitely not right. Here's another view so you can see how the wire is routed around the torque arm. You know, this is key to have this little bit of slack so when the suspension collapses, it doesn't pull the wire tight. And the final thing with the rear track shock is you want to run the wire in the channel of the wire guard and then place the guard over the torque arm, fasten it tightly, and then your final cable tie on the designated cable tie location. All right, when you're all finished with the rear suspension, your wires should come out just like this. This is what perfection looks like. All right, wires are about the same length, so if they're not like this, there's something wrong from here to there or here to there. So make sure you go back and check to make sure it's right. So when installing the switch onto the handlebar, you'll have to remove the stock cable ties that are on the handlebar and then route the wire through there and then install some of the zip ties that are included in the package. And what I suggest is going up, standing in your riding position, and then adjusting the switch to your personal preference where it feels nice. Like, oh yeah, that feels real nice right there. So next you want to put the connector for the switch through the same hole as the throttle cable and all the wiring, and then plug it in. And remember, when you plug it in, to make sure that you fasten everything away from the pipe and away from the steering. Now we're going to install the rear suspension wires, and a tip is to make sure that you do it one wire at a time. So we've already ran one wire, and you can see here what we're using is actually some welding rod, coat hanger, anything like that works well, but you put it on, tape it on, and remember when you're taping the wire onto it, to not just tape the plug on, but go a little bit further and tape the wire, because you don't want to remove the plug when you're pulling it through. So you fish it in there, you grab your welding rod or coat hanger and just fish it all the way down the tube. Once you've run the wires through the tube and connected them here on the bottom, you just want to install the toe kick guard. Special note, when you're running the wires through the tube, make sure that you place the wires on each side of this bolt here, as you can see. So we finished installing the ECU onto the ECU plate. And one of the things to watch for is when you're tightening the bolts, make sure that you only tighten it so the bolt is flush with the nylock. Otherwise, you'll be over tightening and it'll mushroom out the rubber. When installing the vibration dampener, remember to put it about 1/4 inch from the top and put it so it's directly on the top and bottom, so about 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Something key to remember when installing the ECU assembly is to install it so the ECU is down, not up like this, because you won't have enough room to put the hood on this way. So make sure you fish it in through the back like this, and then take the P-clamp and attach it on the side. All right, once the ECU assembly is installed and fastened down, then you simply have to just put the plug in, and then you just crank it down until it clicks. All right, caution, caution, very important. Remember, when installing the PCB portion of the wiring, to not install a cable tie over the PCB, but only on the clearly labeled cable tie spots. Remember when installing the plug into the shock, to listen for the click to make sure it's completely seated. After you have it fully seated, install the cable tie on the clearly marked cable tie location. After you've finished installing all the wiring, make sure that you double check the power supply, make sure it's connected well, and then just go by and check the cables, make sure the cable ties are on the designated spots, nothing's laying on the pipe, nothing's near the steering, everything's free and clear so you can go out and have some fun. The iQS system is fully installed. Now the only thing we have to do now is put some air in those shocks. Let me show you how it's done. So when you're putting air in the shocks, you have to remember to always have the skis off the ground so there's no pressure on the shocks. And one of the things you have to remember is a lot of times when you tip the sled up, you can do it by rolling the sled on its side, but you have to make sure that there's no pressure on the bottom ski if you have a sway bar, because that will put pressure on the shocks. So when you air up the shock, you always want to remember to do the e-vol first. And you can see on this one, we're supposed to have 130 pounds in the e-vol, so we pump it up. And if you go over the handy pump that's included, you just bump it a couple times and it'll lower it down. You know, one of the things that people are nervous about is when they remove the pump, you hear that little bit of air that comes out. And all that air is the air that's in the line on the pump. So don't be concerned with it. So after you've filled the eval, you want to move down to the main chamber, which is right at the bottom of the eval chamber. And when you're putting the pump on, you want to make sure that you get it all the way tight where it bottoms out so you have a nice tight seal. And once you've finished installing the air, you want to make sure to reinstall the caps. And one thing with the caps, you just have to put them on finger tight and they'll stay on there. They have a nice O-ring that keeps them sealed. So now, all we got to do is go to the other side and finish it up. All right, so there's a couple things to remember when you're installing air in the rear shocks. One thing that's key is making sure that the rear suspension is fully off the ground so there's no pressure on it, because if you have any pressure on the shock, you're going to have an inaccurate read on your pressures. So with the rear track, you want to start off with the eval similar to the front, do the eval chamber first, then move it to the main chamber and fill that up. You know, something a little bit different on the center shock is you have to remember there's no eval, so you can go right to the main chamber and fill it up. Keep in mind that the beauty of the air shocks is they are completely adjustable, so you can go from one extreme to the other, all with the air pump. So go off of the baseline and adjust it as needed. All right, we've successfully installed the iQS system and you're ready for some push button suspension adjustment. If you have any other questions or thoughts, go to ridefox.com and you'll be able to find everything you need.